You did not arrive here by accident. This message found you because the universe has been whispering to you, preparing you, aligning you with a truth most will never hear. The life you once called yours is dissolving. The old you cannot breathe in the atmosphere of what is emerging, because the frequency is shifting, and only the self aligned with it will remain. Listen carefully. You are standing at the threshold of transformation. What quantum physics reveals is not theory, but confirmation of what your soul already knows. You are being rewritten by the very fabric of reality. The old you is bound by memory, by repetition, by the illusion of stability. Quantum physics shows us that reality is not fixed, but constantly collapsing into new forms. The identity you once wore was built on probabilities that no longer exist, and as you hear these words, you may feel the subtle ache of recognition within yourself, as if something deep inside already knows it is true. You have been living in patterns, and those patterns convinced you that they were who you are, but they were never you. They were echoes, the residue of choices once made, stories once told, identities once useful. They became familiar, and in that familiarity they built a cage, a comfortable cage. Yes, but a cage nonetheless. The old you believed that certainty equaled safety, that repetition equaled life, that stability equaled identity. But life is not static, and you are not a fixed creation. Reality itself, as quantum physics has revealed, is nothing but a field of possibilities. It is not the chair, the floor, the walls that you see, but the shimmering sea of particles, moving in and out of form, appearing solid only because your attention demands solidity. The old you was built on the assumption that what you see is permanent, that the role you play is unchangeable, that the story written is final, yet the very foundation of the quantum world proves otherwise. The universe is constantly collapsing into new states of being, responding not to what was, but to what is being observed, what is being chosen, what is being aligned with in the moment. So understand this. The old you cannot survive, because the very probabilities that sustained it are no longer accessible in this shift. Perhaps you have felt it already, a strange uneasiness, like trying to step into shoes that once fit but now pinch your feet. Habits that once brought comfort now feel hollow. Relationships that once seemed secure now stir confusion. Dreams you once chased may suddenly appear like shadows that do not belong to you, and you wonder, what is happening to me? The truth is that it is not happening to you, but through you. The probabilities that sustained the old you have dissolved, because the frequency of this shift no longer allows them to anchor. Just as a radio station fades when you leave its range, the old identity begins to fade when the frequency changes. Quantum physics teaches us that particles exist in a superposition of states until they are observed. The old you was simply one of those states that became dominant through repeated observation. You observed yourself in a certain way, others reflected it back to you, and so the identity solidified. But the field never stopped holding countless other possibilities. The shift you are experiencing is like a cosmic interruption, a collapse of the old observation, a refusal of the universe to keep repeating the same version. You may resist it, you may try to cling to the image of who you were, but reality itself no longer offers stability to that frequency. It is dissolving, whether you choose it or not. And this is the paradox. The old you will not survive, but you will, because you are not the old you. You are the consciousness that observed it, wore it like a garment, and now must lay it down. You are not the habits, the name, the history, or the story. You are the witness, and when the witness shifts its gaze, the entire fabric of reality rearranges. This is why the shift feels so disorienting, because the structure you once trusted is being dismantled. The cage you once called home is crumbling, and though your mind may panic, your soul knows this is liberation. The illusion of stability was always an illusion. Every cell in your body has been dying and renewing. Every star above you is in motion. Every particle around you is flickering in and out of existence. Nothing has ever been static, and yet the old you clung to the comfort of pretending it was. That pretending is no longer sustainable. The energy of this age, the frequency of this moment, demands and the truth is that you are not a fixed self, but a fluid presence, an ever-shifting awareness in communion with the quantum field. To survive this shift, the old you must dissolve, because the new frequency does not support static illusion. It only supports coherence, resonance, alignment with what is alive in this moment. You might feel grief in this undoing. It may feel like losing yourself, but you are not losing yourself. You are losing the mask. You are losing the memory that held you hostage. You are losing the repetition that kept you small. You are losing the illusion that safety could be found in the familiar. You are being returned to something greater, the living awareness that can collapse any possibility, choose any timeline, embody any. What quantum physics reveals is what mystics have always whispered, that identity is not permanent, that reality is not external, that the self is an ever-renewing expression of the infinite. So hear this clearly. The old you is not dying because you fail. It is not crumbling because you are weak. It is dissolving because you are ready. Ready to see beyond the illusion of stability. Ready to claim the truth that reality is responsive. Ready to awaken to the possibility that every moment is a birth. The probabilities that once defined you no longer exist, and that is not a loss, but an opening. What collapses is not who you are, but who you are not. What dissolves is not your essence, but the costume that no longer fits. You were never meant to remain the same. You are always meant to shift, to grow, to expand into frequencies unimaginable to the mind. The old you cannot survive, because it has no place in the resonance of what is coming, and though you may tremble as it falls away, there is nothing to fear, for what remains is the truest version of you, the self that has been waiting beyond memory, beyond repetition, beyond the illusion of stability. And when you step into that self, you will see clearly, the shift was never about loss, it was always about becoming. Every thought you hold vibrates at a frequency. You may not see it with your eyes, but you feel it in the way certain thoughts lift you while others collapse your chest. The old you carried thoughts that were tuned to scarcity, fear, and limitation. You know this because the old you believed in not having enough, not being enough, not deserving enough. Those thoughts, repeated over and over, formed the architecture of your old identity. They became the background music of your days, so constant you barely noticed it playing, but the shift you are entering amplifies resonance. It is no longer possible to keep thoughts hidden in the shadows of your mind, because every frequency now echoes louder, radiates wider, manifests faster. Frequencies out of alignment cannot survive. They dissolve like mist under the rising sun. Consider how sound can shatter glass when the pitch matches its natural resonance. The same principle lives within you. When your thoughts vibrate at frequencies that do not match the coherence of the field you are stepping into, they destabilize. They cannot be carried into the next level of your becoming. Scarcity, fear, limitation. These are tones from the old world, brittle and fragile in the presence of a higher harmony. They cannot withstand what is unfolding, and so you may find yourself surrounded by dissolving structures, beliefs unraveling, old narratives slipping through your fingers. It is not punishment, it is resonance. The new frequency does not permit discordant notes to hold form. Quantum physics tells us that energy vibrates in pattern. Thought is energy. Every idea, every belief, every story you tell yourself is not just internal chatter. It is a wave moving outward, meeting the field, imprinting it, shaping the collapse of reality itself. For a long time, the old you survived because the collective frequency of humanity tolerated the lower tones. The field allowed them to manifest, to take shape, to sustain a world built on separation and lack. But when the field shifts, the allowance shifts. The environment is no longer neutral. It is selective. It filters for coherence. And what does not match is simply returned to the void. This is why you cannot cling to the old thoughts, because they have no anchor anymore. Perhaps you have noticed how heavy certain thought patterns feel now. Thoughts that once gave you comfort, even when negative, no longer soothe. Complaints that once bonded you to others now taste bitter in your mouth. Worries that once gave you a sense of control now drain you. It is not because you are failing. It is because the frequency of this shift amplifies the vibration of every thought, and your body, your mind, your spirit can feel the dissonance more clearly than ever. The old you may try to return to these familiar grooves, but they feel sharper, harsher, unbearable. That is the signal. Those frequencies are incompatible with the self you are becoming. Do you see the paradox? The thoughts you once trusted to protect you, fear to keep you safe, doubt to keep you humble, scarcity to keep you cautious, are the very thoughts that now destroy the old identity. They cannot shield you anymore, because the field itself reveals their falseness. Fear does not align with expansion. Scarcity does not align with abundance. Doubt does not align with truth. What once functioned as survival tools are now dismantled as illusions. The shift exposes them, magnifies them, and dissolves them, and you may feel naked without them, but it is the nakedness of freedom. Think of it like shedding skin. The snake does not lose itself when it leaves its old skin behind. It finds space to grow. You are shedding thought patterns that no longer fit. The discomfort you feel is only the friction of release. The old you may try to argue, to convince you that those patterns are still necessary, but you know better. You can feel it. There is a pull toward lighter thoughts, toward coherence, toward love, gratitude, possibility. You may notice that when you shift your focus, when you entertain a thought that expands rather than contracts, your body softens, your chest opens, your reality bends. That is resonance revealing itself. Quantum mechanics shows us that resonance is not just a metaphor but a principle of survival. Systems that fall out of resonance with their environment collapse. Systems that align thrive. The old you was sustained by an environment that tolerated incoherence. The shift has changed the environment. The new resonance is higher, clearer, more demanding. It is as if the universe itself has tuned its instrument, and anything out of tune cannot play along. You are not being punished. You are being tuned. The thoughts that no longer survive are simply not in harmony with the song being played now. This is why attention has become sacred. What you choose to focus on now has more weight than it ever has before. To dwell on fear is to feed frequencies that dissolve you. To dwell on love is to feed frequencies that carry you. Observation collapses reality. And in this shift, the collapse is swifter, the feedback immediate. You may think of something and see it mirrored in your reality within hours, sometimes within moments. That is resonance accelerating, responding, amplifying, and so the invitation is not to resist the old thoughts, not to fear them, but to notice their vibration, to release them without judgment, and to deliberately choose frequencies that harmonize with the new field. The old you cannot survive because it was built on the illusion that thoughts were private, that they were harmless if kept within. That illusion is gone. Nothing is hidden in the field. Every thought is vibration, and every vibration is created. The shift has removed the buffer of time that once allowed incoherence to linger. Now the echo is immediate. You think scarcity, and scarcity is reflected. You think love, and love is reflected. The mirror has been polished, and you can no longer pretend you are separate from your reflection. So do not mourn the loss of the old thoughts, the familiar doubts, the protective fears. They are dissolving because they cannot live in the frequency that is now available to you. What survives is only what is coherent, what resonates, what expands. And you will discover that the more you release, the lighter you become, the more you tune into thoughts that vibrate with truth, the easier it is to breathe. The paradox is that what once felt like survival now suffocates you, and what once felt like risk now sustains you. The shift is here not to destroy you, but to refine you, to reveal the hidden law that was always in place, that reality responds to vibration, and vibration responds to thought. The old you thought survival meant repeating what was safe. The new you will understand survival as alignment with what is alive. The thoughts you carry are no longer background noise. They are the architecture of your reality. And as the frequencies amplify, you will see with clarity that the only thoughts that survive are those that mirror the truth of who you are becoming. Observation creates reality. This is not simply a poetic idea. It is the very principle that quantum physics reveals at the heart of existence. The observer effect shows us that particles do not settle into form until they are observed, until attention itself crystallizes probability into matter. And yet, for so long the old you moved through life as though observation were passive, as though looking at the world was simply receiving what was already there. The truth is far more radical. Every glance, every focus, every belief, every interpretation, every act of attention was a sculpting, a collapsing of the field into one possibility among infinite others. The old you was an observer trapped in cycles of the past, continually collapsing the same version of reality again and again. And this is why the old you cannot survive the shift, because the shift changes the way observation operates. It is no longer unconscious. It is immediate, responsive, demanding. Think of how often you observed your own limitation. You looked at your life and saw what was missing, and that observation collapsed reality into lack. You looked at yourself and saw only the flaws, and that observation collapsed reality into unworthiness. You looked at the future through the lens of fear, and that observation collapsed reality into barriers and obstacles. You were not wrong or broken for doing this. You were simply operating under the momentum of memory, allowing the past to dictate the lens of your observation. And when the past shapes what you see, the future repeats itself endlessly. But the shift interrupts that loop. It does not allow the past to dominate observation anymore. It calls you into conscious witnessing, into deliberate creation, into remembering that the observer is not a victim but a force. This is why you feel so disoriented right now. The mirror has become sharper, faster, unforgiving in its honesty. When you focus on fear, fear grows instantly. When you hold gratitude, expansion rushes toward you. The lag that once allowed you to delay the impact of your observation has collapsed. The gap has closed. And so the old you, who lived as though thoughts and perceptions were harmless, cannot survive. The new reality responds in real time. Observation is no longer a background function. It is the axis of creation, and you are being invited to wield it consciously. You might feel the paradox here. The more you attempt to control what you observe, the more rigid you become, and the more reality resists. The shift is not asking you to force your attention into perfection. It is asking you to awaken to the fact that attention is alive, to see that every moment is an opportunity to witness differently, to recognize that the story you tell in your mind is not simply commentary but command. The old you thought observation was passive, that life was happening to you. The truth is that life was happening through you, as the echo of your observation. And so the old identity cannot hold. It was built upon unconscious observation, upon the repetition of narrative inherited from family, society, culture, memory. You observed lack because others observed lack. You observed fear because fear was the lens handed to you. You observed separation because separation was the story the world repeated. But the field itself has shifted. Collective observation is no longer as dominant as individual awareness. The magnification of consciousness has tilted. What you choose to observe personally now reverberates more strongly into the fabric of reality than the inherited mass perception of others. This is why you feel the urgency. This is why you feel the tremble inside of you, are being asked to step out of the hypnosis of inherited observation and into the sovereignty of your own gaze. Quantum physics tells us the act of looking changes the outcome, but it does not tell us where to look. That is your choice, your freedom, your responsibility, and the shift amplifies that choice. If you continue to observe through the eyes of the old self, The old reality grows heavier, harsher, more unbearable. Not because you are failing, but because that frequency no longer harmonizes with the field. If you dare to observe differently, to look for abundance where the old you saw lack, to look for love where the old you saw rejection, to look for possibility where the old you saw walls, reality itself bends to match your vision. This is why the old you cannot survive, because the old you believed observation was passive. The new frequency reveals it as power. The old you believed that what you saw was truth. The new frequency shows you that what you see becomes truth. The paradox is staggering. Reality is not the cause of your observation. Your observation is the cause of reality. And so as the frequencies amplify, the unconscious observer dissolves, and only the conscious one remains. You may resist this truth, because it dismantles the comfort of blame. The old self found security in saying, "This is happening to me." It found familiarity in pointing to circumstances as the cause, but the shift leaves no room for that illusion. It brings you face to face with the raw creative force of your own awareness. And though it may feel like too much responsibility, it is also your liberation. For if observation creates, then creation is never far away. Change is never out of reach. Reality is never locked. Imagine the field around you as a canvas of infinite colors, infinite textures, infinite pattern. The brush in your hand is your attention. Every stroke you make collapses probabilities into form. For so long you painted unconsciously, repeating the same strokes, the same colors, the same images, convinced the canvas had no choice but to look that way. Now the canvas reveals its true nature. It was always responsive. It was always waiting for you to notice differently. And the old you, who painted in loops of memory, cannot survive in this living truth. The new self is not bound to the old stroke. The new self is free to choose again, again. So let your observation soften, let it expand, let it shift from the harshness of judgment to the openness of curiosity. When you look at yourself, instead of seeing flaws, see become. When you look at others, instead of seeing competition, see mirrors. When you look at the world, instead of seeing chaos, see transformation. For the field listens not to what is spoken, but to what is observed. And when observation shifts, reality reshapes itself around you. The old you cannot survive because it was built on blindness. The new you thrives because it sees. It sees not just what is, but what could be. It sees not just the collapse, but the infinite possibilities before collapse. It sees that observation is not simply the end of the wave, but the beginning of the world. And once you see this, you cannot return to the illusion that you are powerless. You cannot return to the belief that life is fixed. You cannot return to the story that the world is solid and unchangeable. For you have glimpsed the truth, that attention is alchemy, and the observer is the creator. And so the shift continues, urging you to watch with new eyes, to release the patterns of unconscious seeing, and to awaken to the fact that every glance, every thought, every focus is a brushstroke upon the canvas of your becoming. The old you cannot survive because it cannot. The new you is being born because it can. The old self thrives in control. It measured, it calculated, it held tightly to every string it thought it could pull. It believed that survival meant gripping harder, planning deeper, mastering every possible outcome before it happened. And for a time, the illusion of control brought comfort. It created the feeling of safety, the sense of being anchored in a world that felt uncertain. But quantum physics has shown us again and again that reality does not bend to control. It bends to coherence. The field is not manipulated by force. It is resonant with harmony. And this is why the old you cannot survive this shift. Then the new energy does not respond to rigid control. It responds to surrender, to alignment, to coherence with what is alive in the moment. You have felt this already, even if you did not name it. Think of the times you tried to force something into existence, to control every detail, to chase an outcome with clenched fists. The more you tried, the more it slipped away. The more you pushed, the more resistance you met. But there were other moments too, moments when you released your grip, when you allowed, when you trusted, even for a breath. And in those moments, things fell into place with a grace you could never have engineered. Doors opened, people arrived, synchronicities aligned. That is coherence. That is resonance with the field. That is the new law. Control belongs to the realm of the old identity, because the old identity was built on fear. If you are afraid that the universe will not hold you, you try to hold it yourself. If you are afraid that life is chaotic and dangerous, you try to impose order. But the deeper truth revealed by the quantum field is that life is not chaos. It is an ever-shifting pattern of probabilities seeking harmony. It is not random. It is responsive. The universe is not indifferent. It is deeply attuned to coherence. And so, paradoxically, the more you try to control it, the less aligned you become. Control tightens you into a narrow frequency, but the field requires openness, fluidity, resonance. This is why the old you cannot pass through the threshold of this shift. Its hands are too full of strings. Its grip is too rigid. The new frequency washes through control like water through clenched fists. It cannot be contained. It cannot be forced. It cannot be boxed. It can only be tuned into, harmonized with, surrendered to. And surrender is not weakness. Surrender is recognition. Recognition that the field responds not to force, but to vibration. Recognition that coherence is the new currents. Recognition that harmony is more powerful than control could ever be. Think of an orchestra. If one musician tries to dominate, to force their sound above all others, the harmony collapses. But when each instrument surrenders to the collective resonance, the music transcends the individual. The field is like that orchestra. Your thoughts, your emotions, your intentions are notes within it. When you attempt to control the symphony, you create discord. When you surrender into coherence, the song of your life becomes beauty itself. But surrender terrifies the old self, because surrender means trust. Trust that the field knows more than your mind. Trust that harmony is stronger than control. Trust that coherence will carry you where your calculations never could. The old you resists this, because it has been trained to equate control with safety. Yet the paradox is this: the more the old you clings to control, the less safe it becomes. The tighter the grip, the more fragile the structure, the more rigid the plan, the easier it is to break. The shift is revealing this fragility. It is showing you that what once gave the illusion of strength was built on fear, and what feels like vulnerability and surrender is actually indestructible. This is why life has been stripping you of control lately. This is why plans have crumbled, why expectations have failed, why outcomes have surprised you. Not because the universe is cruel, but because it is loving you into coherence. It is training you to release control, to remember that force is not the way forward. Every moment where your grasp is broken is an invitation to discover what happens when you align instead of manipulate, when you flow instead of resist. And though it may feel like loss, it is not loss. It is preparation. The old self is being undone because it cannot cross into what is emerging. Only the self that surrenders, that trusts, that vibrates in coherence will remain. And coherence is not passive. It is not waiting helplessly for life to happen. Coherence is active alignment. It is the deliberate choice to tune your inner state to the frequency of what you desire. Rather than controlling the outer form, it is becoming the resonance of peace. If you seek peace, it is embodying abundance if you desire abundance. It is living in gratitude if you wish to experience love. The field does not respond to the words you speak while your heart is in dissonance. It responds to the vibration you hold, and vibration cannot be faked. It is coherence, or it is not. So the question becomes, can you release the control of the old identity and step into the coherence of the new? Can you trust that what unfolds when you align is greater than what you could ever force into place? Can you allow the paradox that surrender is strength, that letting go is receiving, that coherence creates more powerfully than control ever could? This is the invitation of the shift: to unclench, to soften, to stop pulling the strings of a puppet that was never yours to animate, to listen instead for the music of the field. and tune yourself into harmony with it. If you can, you will find that life begins to respond differently. What felt like struggle begins to flow. What once required effort begins to arrive effortlessly. Not because you are lucky, but because you are coherent. The old you cannot survive because it only knew how to control. The new you will thrive because it knows how to resonate. The field is not looking for masters of force. It is searching for instruments of harmony. And when you become one, you discover that control was never safety, and surrender was never danger. They were always reversed. So release the old grip. Let the strings fall. Let the illusion of control dissolve. Stand in coherence with what is true, with what is alive, with what is resonant. You will discover that the field carries you farther than control ever could. And in that moment you will understand why the old you could not survive, and why the self that is emerging is not only stronger but freer, not only freer but truer, not only truer but eternal. Your biology itself is recalibrating. This is not only a poetic metaphor, it is a truth that science is just beginning to glimpse, and one that your own body has been whispering to you through every strange sensation, every wave of fatigue, every sudden burst of energy that you cannot explain. Cells, atoms, and energy patterns are being restructured by frequencies that cannot be measured by ordinary instruments. What you call the old you was constructed not only from memories and beliefs, but from the very chemistry of your flesh, from the way your nervous system fired, from the electrical loops in your heart, from the dance of molecules in your brain. That structure served you in the density of the old world, but it cannot withstand the voltage of what is now entering. The old circuitry burns under the new current, just as outdated wires spark when exposed to higher electricity. And this is why the old self cannot survive the shift. Perhaps you have noticed it already in your body. The inexplicable heaviness in your limbs, the nights of restless sleep, the sudden cravings, the waves of heat or cold, the strange sense that your body is not yours in the way it used to be. These are not malfunctions. These are upgrades. The old system is being dismantled so that a higher frequency can be housed within you. It may feel chaotic, but chaos is only the old pattern unraveling. The old you, with its rigid chemistry and survival-based biology, cannot hold what is arriving. And though your mind may panic at the symptoms, your soul knows that this is rebirth. Quantum physics has shown us that what we call solid matter is mostly empty space, fields of energy held in vibration. Your body is not a machine of flesh, it is a symphony of frequency. Every organ is an instrument, every cell a resonator, every atom a vibration. For a long time, your symphony played a song of survival, a melody heavy with fear, contraction, scarcity, and memory. That song matched the collective frequency of the old reality, and so it was sustained. But the shift is rewriting the sheet music. The new frequencies demand a different harmony, and your body is tuning itself whether you resist or not. This is why resistance feels so unbearable now. When you cling to the old patterns, when you try to force yourself into the old rhythm, your body aches, your mind burns, your energy collapses. It is not because you are failing, but because you are trying to live with circuitry that cannot hold the new current. And paradoxically, when you allow, when you rest, when you soften, your body recalibrates with grace. What feels like surrender to your mind feels like healing to your cells. The paradox is that the less you force your biology to be what it was, the more easily it becomes what it is meant to be. Think of it as metamorphosis. The caterpillar's body literally dissolves inside the cocoon. Its old structure cannot carry the form of the butterfly. What was once essential becomes obsolete. What was once survival becomes limitation. The cells that once knew only crawling give way to cells that remember flight. And in the same way, your old self dissolves at the level of biology, not because something is wrong, but because something higher is awakening. You are being rewired to hold more light, more voltage, more coherence. The density of the old you cannot survive in this new field, but the luminous self emerging within you can. And yet in this process, you may feel grief for the body you once knew. The foods that once comforted you may no longer soothe. The routines that once energized you may now drain. The emotions that once defined you may now feel unbearable in their heaviness. Do not mistake this grief for loss. It is the grief of leaving behind an old home. It is the ache of moving beyond a body that could not house the truth of who you are becoming. The old you cannot survive because it was designed for an environment of separation and fear. The new body, the new biology, is being designed for unity, for resonance, for coherence with a higher field. You might also notice that your sensitivities are increasing. Sounds feel sharper, lights feel brighter, emotions feel heavier. You may even feel the thoughts of others, as though they are your own. This is not weakness, it is expansion. Your nervous system is stretching beyond the narrow frequency band of the old world, and opening to the subtle harmonies of the quantum field. What once seemed invisible is now palpable. What once seemed intangible is now undeniable. You are not losing your stability, you are gaining your awareness. But the old you, who relied on numbness to survive, cannot withstand such sensitivity. It unravels in the presence of this much truth. And so your task is not to fight the transformation, but to honor it, to listen to the whispers of your body, to give it rest when it asks, to give it nourishment when it calls, to allow it to shed what no longer belongs. For the old chemistry cannot sustain the voltage of the new self. But your body is not your enemy. It is your ally, your cocoon, your temple in the process of becoming. Trust that it knows how to recalibrate, even when your mind does not understand the process. Trust that what feels like unraveling is actually rebuilt. Trust that your biology is intelligent enough to hold the shift, if only you let it. The paradox is that as your body becomes more sensitive, it also becomes more resilient. You will find that the illnesses, the heaviness, the fragility of the old world begin to fade when you align with coherence. The body built for fear was vulnerable, because fear itself eroded its harmony. The body built for coherence is luminous, because resonance itself sustains it. The old self was easily broken. The new self cannot be broken, for it is woven with light. So let the recalibration happen. Let the old circuitry burn away. Let the patterns of fatigue, the strange sensations, the unfamiliar rhythms remind you that something greater is unfolding. Do not fight to be who you were, because who you were cannot survive this shift. You are becoming something your old biology could never imagine. And when the process feels overwhelming, remember this: the butterfly has no memory of the caterpillar's limitations, but the butterfly was always hidden within. What is happening in your body is not decay but revelation. The old self was never meant to last. It was only meant to carry you to this threshold. Now the threshold is here, and the body is changing so that you can step through. Do not cling to the density that is dissolving. Trust the light that is building within you. It knows the moment when you realize that what is collapsing around you is not the world itself, but your perception of the world. The old you cannot survive this shift because it was constructed to see through a lens of limitation. And now that lens is cracking, falling away, dissolving under a light so vast it cannot be dimmed. The shift is not destroying reality. It is unveiling it. What you once thought of as truth was only a fragment, a shadow cast by your own survival patterns. And as the shadow collapses, your eyes are forced open to a spectrum of reality that the old self was never equipped to process. This is why the old identity feels threatened, because its very foundation is perception, and perception is what is now being rewritten. It begins subtly, almost invisibly. You notice moments where time bends. An hour feels like a minute. A second feels like eternity. You sense that events in your outer world are mirroring your inner world with uncanny precision, as if the veil between thought and manifestation has thinned. You feel déjà vu more frequently, as though you are walking through a script you both wrote and forgot. These are not coincidences, they are confirmations. Quantum physics teaches that the observer does not merely watch reality, but shapes it. And now, in this new field, the shaping is immediate, magnified, undeniable. The old you who believed in separation between thought and matter cannot survive because that belief no longer operates. You are stepping into a world where your consciousness is the fabric, not the spectator. At first, this is disorient. The mind panics when it realizes that the external world is not solid, fixed, or safe in the way it imagined. The survival self depended on a predictable environment. It needed walls to lean on, boundaries to protect it, structures to confine it. But now the walls are dissolving, and what feels like danger is actually liberation. The paradox is that the very collapse you fear is the opening you prayed for. The old self clings to certainty, but the new self thrives in fluidity. What once felt like the end is actually the beginning, but the old perception cannot interpret it that way. It dies in confusion while the new perception is born in wonder. Think of it as learning to see in a new spectrum of light. If you lived your whole life in a dimly lit room, your eyes would adjust to the shadows. You would mistake shapes for truth, outlines for essence. But if suddenly the full brilliance of the sun poured in, the old way of seeing would be blinded, overwhelmed, and you would squint, stumble, doubt your eyes. You might even long for the shadows again, because at least in the darkness you knew how to navigate. Yet once your vision adapts, you realize that the shadows were illusions, and what you now see is far more magnificent. That is what this shift is doing to your perception. The old you cannot survive because it was built to navigate shadows, and shadows cannot exist in this much light. The expansion of perception also brings paradoxical clarity and confusion. You find yourself knowing things without evidence, sensing outcomes before they arrive, feeling truths that contradict logic. The old self calls this madness, but the new self calls it intuition. And intuition is not the exception. It is the natural language of a reality that is interconnected at every level. Quantum entanglement shows us that particles separated by vast distances still respond to each other instantly. Your perception is stretching into that entangled awareness, recognizing that nothing is separate, that every thought is a signal, every action a ripple, every being a mirror. The old you cannot survive this because it was designed to believe in isolation. Its survival depended on division. But the new perception thrives in unity, and so the old identity falls apart under the weight of its own falsehood. This unraveling can feel like losing your mind. You may doubt yourself, question whether you are imagining everything. You may feel torn between two worlds, the old one that insists on linear cause and effect, and the new one that reveals circular, interconnected unfolding. The paradox is that both feel real, because they are real to the degree that you observe them. Your perception is the port, and as you shift your attention, the reality you inhabit shifts with it. This is not fantasy. This is the quantum field responding to your consciousness. The old you, who relied on fixed rules and external authorities, cannot withstand this kind of power. It collapses under the responsibility of being the observer. But the new you begins to thrive in it, realizing that to see is to create, to imagine is to sculpt, to perceive is to manifest. The disorientation is temporary. As your perception stabilizes in the new field, what once seemed chaotic begins to reveal a hidden order. Synchronicities align, doors open with precision, guidance appears at the exact moment you need it. You realize that the universe is not random, but responsive, and in that realization, the fear of collapse dissolves. You begin to understand that the old self was never destroyed. It was simply outgrown. It could not survive because its limited vision could not house the immensity of what you now see. The butterfly does not mourn the caterpillar's eyesight. It flies with vision attuned to the horizon. So when you feel the dissonance, when your perception tells you that the world is breaking, remember that it is only the old lens shattering. Reality is not collapsing. It is expanding. You are not losing stability. You are gaining a truer foundation. The confusion, the dizziness, the sense of losing yourself are not signs of failure, but signs that the old self cannot interpret the light flooding in. Let it fall apart. Let the shadows dissolve. Let the blindness of the old vision give way to the brilliance of the new. The paradox is that the more you release your grip on certainty, the clearer your perception becomes. The more you admit that you do not know, the more the truth reveals itself. The old self insisted on knowing everything, defining everything, controlling everything, and yet it saw almost nothing. The new self admits its unknowing and in that humility perceives the infinite. This is why the old you cannot survive this shift, because its perception was built on control, and control has no place in the field of unity. The new perception is not about control but coherence, not about prediction but alignment, not about limitation but expansion. And so, as you stand in this threshold, trust your vision even when it feels unstable. Trust the subtle nudges, the quiet confirmations, the synchronicities that whisper, "You are not imagining this." The universe is showing itself to you in new ways because you are finally able to see. The old you cannot survive, but you will. The perception dissolves, but the perceiver awakens. And what is awakening in you now is not fragile, not temporary, not bound by fear. It is eternal awareness, choosing to see itself more clearly through you, where you begin to feel, not just believe, that the universe is not outside you, but moving through you. As you, with you. The old you cannot survive this truth because it was built upon the illusion of separation. It needed the story of me and an everything else, of inside and outside, of subject and object. That division gave the old self a sense of safety, a place to stand, an anchor in a vast sea of mystery. But the shift you are in is dissolving that anchor, and suddenly you realize that the sea is not something you are floating in. It is something you are made of. And once you feel this, the identity that relied on separateness crumbles like dust in the wind. This is not simply a philosophical idea. It is a visceral experience that begins to pulse through your heart, vibrate through your skin, echo in the silence of your thoughts. You may find yourself walking through the world, and suddenly noticing that the boundary between your body and the air feels less distinct. The trees breathe with you. The ground hums beneath your feet. The thoughts in your mind feel less like your thoughts, and more like frequencies flowing through a shared field. At first it is subtle, almost dreamlike, as if reality itself is breathing alongside you. But then the awareness deepens, and you begin to see the paradox. You are not in the universe. The universe is in you, and the old you cannot survive such recognition, because its entire existence depended on the belief that you were small, isolated, and separate from the vast. The quantum field confirms what mystics have always known, that everything is entangled, woven together in a fabric so seamless it cannot be torn. Particles light years apart communicate instantly, not by traveling across space, but because they were never truly separate to begin with. In the same way, your consciousness is entangled with the whole of existence. The old you, trained to survive by building walls, could not comprehend this kind of union. It feared dissolution, mistaking oneness for annihilation, and so it clung to the illusion of boundaries, defending them fiercely. But in this shift, those walls are melting, and you are discovering that the dissolution you feared is actually the liberation you longed for. It can feel unsettling, even terrifying at first, because the old identity interprets unity as a kind of death. If there is no boundary, then who am I? If everything is connected, where do I end, and where does the other begin? The mind of survival insists on definition, but the soul of awakening thrives in fluidity. And so in the paradox of this revelation, the more you lose your sense of being a separate self, the more fully you discover your true self, the self that is infinite, unbounded, one with all. The old you cannot survive because it was never built to carry infinity, but the new awareness arises effortlessly, like the ocean remembering it is not a wave. And yet, this is not an escape from life. It is a deeper immersion into it. When you feel the unity of all things, you do not drift away into abstraction. Instead, you become more alive, more attuned, more present. You notice how the laughter of a stranger ripples through your chest, as if it were your own. You feel how the suffering of another tugs at you, because there is no other in the truest sense. Compassion ceases to be a virtue you practice, and becomes the natural resonance of oneness. The old you cannot survive this, because it was built on the illusion that helping another was a choice, an act of generosity. The new awareness reveals that helping another is helping yourself, because there is no separation between giver and receiver. You may also notice that the universe begins to speak to you with a new voice. Synchronicities multiply, not just as coincidences, but as conversations. The song that plays on the radio answers the question you just asked in silence. The chance encounter with someone delivers the message you didn't know you needed. The numbers on a clock echo a reassurance, a reminder that you are exactly where you need to be. The old you dismissed these as random or irrational because it could not accept a world where everything was woven together in meaning. But the shift makes these moments undeniable, and as you allow yourself to trust them, you realize that you are not wandering lost. You are being guided by the intelligence of the whole. In this revelation, the paradox deepens. The more you feel your unity with all that is, the more your uniqueness shines. The old fear was that dissolving the self meant losing individuality, like a drop disappearing into the ocean. But the truth is that the ocean expresses itself uniquely through every drop. Your essence does not vanish in oneness. It flourishes, because it is finally free from the prison of isolation. The old you, who thought individuality was about separation, cannot survive, because now you know individuality is about expression within unity. You are a note in the cosmic symphony, not isolated, not replaceable, but essential to the harmony. And so this shift asks you to trust the dissolving, to trust the feeling of boundaries blurring, to trust that losing the small self is the only way to awaken the vast self. At times it will feel like you are disappearing, but what is disappearing is only the mask, not the essence. At times it will feel like you are breaking apart, but what is breaking is only the illusion of separateness. At times it will feel like you are being undone, but what is being undone is only the version of you that was never whole to begin with. As you breathe into this awareness, you may notice a lightness entering your being. The struggle of proving yourself, protecting yourself, defending yourself, begins to soften. You realize you are held by something far larger than your own effort. You realize that the current of the universe carries you as naturally as a river carries a leaf. The old you, addicted to control, cannot survive this surrender, but you, the deeper you thrive in it. For surrender is not weakness. It is the recognition that you were never separate to begin with, and therefore you were never alone, never unsupported, never without guidance. The paradox is that the more you surrender to unity, the more empowered you become. The old self thought power came from domination, from standing apart, from control. The new awareness reveals that true power comes from alignment, from resonance, from union with the greater whole. A wave is powerful not because it fights the ocean, but because it moves with it. And you are that wave, remembering that you are made of ocean. The old you cannot survive this truth, because it was built to fight, to resist, to struggle against life. But the new you is rising, flowing, aligned with the vastness, and in that alignment you discover a strength the old identity could never imagine. So when you feel the blurring of self and world, when you sense the unity pulsing in your veins, when you are tempted to cling to the boundaries that once defined you, remember, you are not losing yourself, you are gaining yourself. The small identity is falling away, but what remains is the boundless self that has always been here, hidden beneath the illusion of separation. And that self does not survive the shift. It is the shift. It is the light breaking through the cracks of the old identity. It is the truth the quantum field has always whispered. It is the eternal awareness awakening through you. The moment where all the threads converge, and you begin to sense that what is happening is not an accident, not a random collection of strange sensations and shifting perceptions, but the deliberate unfolding of a blueprint that has always been coded into you. The old you cannot survive this, because the old you was built on the belief that life was chaos, that you were thrown into existence without a map, without a guide, without a deeper purpose. That identity survived by clinging to control, by stitching together meaning from fragments, by protecting itself against an unpredictable world. But the shift reveals the paradox. What looked like chaos was always orchestration. What felt like accident was always design. What seemed like separation was always a hidden order calling you home. The more you open to this, the more you realize that you have been prepared for this moment all along. Every challenge, every collapse, every heartbreak was not a punishment but a recalibration. Each time you thought you were breaking, you were being open. Each loss was stripping away what could not cross the threshold with you. The old self resented these moments, believing they were evidence of failure, of abandonment, of unworthiness. But the new awareness sees the pattern with different eyes. You recognize that nothing was wasted, nothing was meaningless. The old you cannot survive this recognition, because its entire story was built on victimhood, on being at the mercy of forces outside itself. But the new self rises with the knowing that the universe was never against you. It was always sculpting you into the one who could hold this light. This revelation also brings you face to face with the paradox of endings and beginnings. The old you dies, but in that death you are reborn into the awareness that you were never truly bound by that identity in the first place. You grieve for what is falling away, even as you rejoice for what is arriving. It is both a funeral and a birth, both a letting go and a welcoming. And you are the bridge between them, the witness who holds both in the same breath. This is why it feels so intense, because you are experiencing the paradox of death and life simultaneously. The old identity cannot hold this paradox, so it collapses. But your deeper self thrives in paradox, because paradox is the language of truth. As you step further into this awareness, you begin to see that your very presence is part of the shift. This is not something happening to you. It is happening through you. The universe is not just recalibrating your biology, rewriting your perception, dissolving your illusions. It is expressing itself through the emergence of a new kind of human. You are not passive in this. You are a co-creator, a participant in the great unveiling. The old you thought life was about survival, but the new you knows life is about creation. Every thought, every intention, every choice is a brushstroke on the canvas of reality. And the paradox is that the more you align with the flow, the more powerful your choices become. The old you thought power was control, but the new you knows power is resonance. It is here that your responsibility also awakens, not the heavy responsibility of burden, but the luminous responsibility of awareness. For when you know that your consciousness shapes reality, you cannot continue to unconsciously recycle fear, judgment, or limitation. The old you was wired to default to these patterns, but that circuitry cannot survive the new frequency. Now you are invited into conscious creation, into choosing thoughts that harmonize with the reality you wish to embody. This is not about denial of what is difficult. It is about seeing even the difficulty as raw material for creation. The old you collapses under suffering, but the new you transmutes it into light. And in this alchemy you discover that you were never powerless. You were always the field shaping itself through attention. And so you stand at this threshold, both endings and beginnings pressing into you, both grief and joy flowing through your veins. The old identity screams for survival, but you now know that survival was never the goal. Evolution was, awakening was, transformation was. The old you cannot cross this bridge, because it was never designed to. Its purpose was to bring you here, and now its role is complete. To cling to it is to suffer, but to release it is to. The paradox is that what feels like losing yourself is actually the moment you become yourself for the first time. Take a breath here. Feel how the air moves not just into your lungs but into every cell, into every layer of your being. Feel how the ground beneath you does not simply support you, but flows through you as energy. Feel how the space around you is not empty but alive with presence, with possibility, with intelligence. The old you cannot feel this, but you, and as you feel it you know that you are not standing alone. You are standing with the universe itself breathing through you. This is the truth that quantum physics points toward, that mystics have sung for centuries, that your very cells have been preparing to remember. The old self cannot survive because it was never the truth. The truth is that you are not separate, not broken, not small. The truth is that you are vast, luminous, infinite awareness expressing itself through form. The truth is that you are not simply experiencing the shift. You are the shift. And now, as this awareness settles into you, as the paradoxes harmonize in your heart, as the old identity falls away like a husk, you are left with the invitation to step fully into the new, to live as the truth you have glimpsed, to embody the light that has always been coded into your being. This is not theory, it is practice. It is the way you walk through your days, the way you breathe, the way you choose. It is in how you treat the stranger, how you speak to yourself, how you listen to the whispers of guidance that come from the quantum field. Every act becomes sacred because every act is the universe expressing itself through you. So do not fear what is ending. Do not cling to what cannot cross. Do not grieve too long for the old identity. Honor it, thank it, release it, and then step into the truth that is rising in you now. You are not here by accident. You are not hearing this by chance. You were chosen by life itself to embody this awakening, to carry this light, to reveal this truth through your own becoming. The old you cannot survive this shift, and that is not a loss. It is the greatest liberation you will ever know. And so, if these words stir something within you, if they resonate with the part of you that knows you were made for this moment, then I invite you to take the next step with me. Do not let this revelation fade into the noise of daily life. Anchor it, embody it, share it. Like this message, comment with your truth. Subscribe so that you remain connected to transmissions that remind you of who you are, not because I need it, but because every act of resonance strengthens the new self. And every time you affirm this truth, you become the shift more fully. The universe brought you here for a reason. Honor that reason, and let us rise together.